This is an overdue update on my 55-gallon Franken frag tank. As you can see, it's mostly nothing but canyon trees, and more canyon trees. I really don't know why this coral self-propagates so much, but it's really getting to the point where it's out of control. Basically, the reason I set up this frag tank was I needed to get some of these out of the display. At last count, I'm up to about 50 1 to 3 inch frags. I actually glued 8 more just before filming this video, and that's just on the frag rack. Down below, a few have been knocked off and some have detached from the plug, so there's probably another dozen or so down here. I don't know what it is, but these guys really like my water. Sometimes I frag so many I forget to put a few back in. Oh well, there's plenty more where that came from. I do have a few other things in this tank. My toadstool also splits quite frequently, and I do have to cut back zoos and pallies and other things. So it is used for other things than the Kenya trees. I have just one hard coral, this little acro frag that I accidentally fragged. It's encrusted over the entire plug now, and it's basically what I use as water quality control. As long as that frag is looking good, things are okay in here. Also this pom-pom xena, which a lot of people think is a beginner coral only, but I can still see the beauty in this thing pulsating, particularly when there's no water flow at all. One thing you'll note is this tank is pretty white with just 14K lighting. 10 years ago this would be considered a little bit blue, but now it's pretty much as white as people will run their tanks. This tank has only been set up for 3 or 4 months, and it was basically all dry rock, but I've got sponges growing everywhere. I'm actually quite surprised at how alive this tank is, considering there's just a little tiny piece of live rock in with the dry rock. There's tons of copepods, stomatellas, mysid shrimp. I did the one other video when the whole front was covered in isopods. There's really all kinds of stuff in here. The other thing I use this tank for is invertebrate quarantine. Just like your fish, these guys can carry disease as well, and it's best to keep them isolated before adding them to your display tank. I've got these Halloween hermit crabs, and I'm generally not too big on hermit crabs, but these guys look much nicer. They are actually much physically bigger than regular hermit crabs, so I'm not quite sure if they'll make it into the display or not. As you can see, they certainly eat detritus though, or at least something in the detritus. And yes, I'm aware there's a giant aptasia right beside the crab. This is the tank. It's not looking very pretty, nor is it trying to. I've thought about adjusting things, but for now this is working. Eventually I'll have to add more lighting or raise the metal halide. Over here, I'm slowly starting to organize the room, and yes, I know some people may cringe that I call this organizing, but it's a lot better than having everything in boxes and Rubbermaid totes. I've got this new 10-gallon sexy shrimp tank, which will get a video of its own once I get proper lighting on the tank. I've got 11 of these guys dancing away in the tank, and so far they're all doing great. Below this is one of my 10-gallon quarantine tanks. I'm just starting a second round of Prazipro while I'm doing the tank transfer method. All the fish are doing great, and they're looking good. This McCosker's wrasse has really nice coloration. This is just in the sunlight, so I can't wait to see him under tank lights. The Royal Grandma is also eating well and looking good. Even the poor Mandarin, who hasn't really eaten anything in the last 2 weeks, is looking good. She's a little bit thin, but swimming around nicely. I think I'll be putting her in the frag tank once the tank transfer method is done, just so she can feast on copepods without any competition, before eventually making her way to the display tank. So yeah, this is about it. A lot of people will say they don't have space for a frag tank in a quarantine system. Well, there's always somewhere you can stick a small tank in your house. It may not be pretty, it doesn't have to be pretty, but you can make it functional with basically anything. Other than a new bulb, I didn't really buy anything for this frag tank. This is just stuff I had laying around, and I've made it work. One of these days I may fix it up, but for now it's working just fine. Thanks for watching, and happy reefing.